So welcome everyone. This is the second version of our hashtag WCW-Women Crushing the Workplace part two from home, of course. My name is Taylor Justin, and I'm the president of National Sales Network Chicago chapter. I want to thank you all for tuning in and streaming live with us for part two of this event. If you joined us for part one, then you already know you're definitely in store for some great jewels and gems from our panelists and our moderator today. Oh, hey, Stacey.
Uh-oh, she's on mute.
I gotcha.
Sorry, guys.
Just doing a quick intro. So this event is very special to Innocent Chicago, as it is an event dedicated to highlighting successful, influential, and powerful women, creating change and crushing the workplace, especially at a time like this. For those of you who are new to National Sales Network, also known as NSN, we are a 501(c) non-for-profit membership organization whose objective is to meet the professional and developmental needs of sales and sales management professionals, and all of us who are just looking to improve our sales skills, as we know it's a transferable skill that is helpful in any and every industry. Throughout the year, we host networking events, professional workshops, and panel discussions such as this one. We have another incredible group of phenomenal women lined up today who'll be leading our conversation. Our first panelist is Stacey Morton. Stacey Morton is a senior sales leader with 20 years of experience in the consumer products industry and has held senior sales and leadership roles at Johnson & Johnson, L'Oreal, and Portu Sunberg. She's a mother of 3 young ladies and enjoys spending time with family and friends, traveling, cooking, and playing golf. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are also joined today by Ashley McGowan. She is a global leader for business equality within the tech industry. In this capacity, Ashley is responsible for stewarding business actions that will lead to a more diverse and inclusive industry. For Ashley, life is about leaving your footprints in the sand. If you were to ask her, she's at the beginning of the mark and she's looking to leave behind. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
And our conversation today will be moderated again by Wachin Yanu. Wachin is a Senior VP of Marketing Partnerships for the WNBA Chicago Sky and is also the founder of I Choose the Ladder, a company focused on curating content and experiences for Black women on the corporate climb. Thank you again for moderating today's panel discussion, Wachin.
You're welcome.
Ladies, thank you again all for joining us. For those who are tuning in, we invite you to ask your questions throughout the event today, and our speakers will answer as many of them as possible with the time allotted. So, Wachin, I will let you take over things from here. Thank you.
Good. Thank you again for joining. My first question, and I always ask this question, when people hear your titles and that you work for L'Oreal and this brand and that brand, it could be intimidating, right? Like there were moments that got you to this point on your career. What's one thing that you think you've learned throughout that has allowed you to be successful in the role that you're in now? And we'll start with Ashley.
Okay. So I think what has helped me so I guess I should step back and say I work in a very new capacity. The term business equality is something that we created. The notion of stewarding business actions that lead to a more diverse and inclusive future is something that we also created. And so in order to land in this space where I created essentially a new business group and am redefining how we think about our impact and diversity and inclusion, I had to be very clear on the strengths that I had and the strengths that I was able to learn in each of my roles leading up to this. I had a long-term time in creative advertising. I did some, obviously, time in sales. And so I sit within our marketing department because that's where a lot of our muscles are in terms of making the business decisions that we can make. And so I had to kind of like take the strengths that I learned in each of those spaces obviously sales was by far where I learned the most in terms of how to put together a value proposition, how to sell myself, how to sell the value that I had for the organization and the value that they should make in diversity and inclusion. But also being able to leverage the storytelling assets that I brought from the creative industry, the people management skills, the influence skills, all of those are strengths that I've honed over time that have put me in a great position to be able to do the work that I do today.
And what about you, Stacey? You oversee like teams of people too, right? So the skill sets that you have to bring to be able to be a leader of most salespeople who are type A, like what have you learned throughout that has helped you be successful in your current role?
You know, I just think of individuals who are growing up in the sales field. I think sales, you pretty much have to work hard and you have to be results driven. Sales are often linked to numbers. So if you come from that sales background, that's the basis. So if you work hard, meet your numbers, meet your goals, exceed your goals, that's kind of what gets you to that next level. But even before that, when you talk about companies and maybe the name sounding intimidating, you know, it starts as young as an internship in college, coming out of college. Oftentimes it does help to have some of the big, you know, consumer product names or pharmaceutical product names, because once you're with those organizations, other folks know you're already trained, you already know what you're doing, so you have the foundation. So to me in sales, the strong foundation, the training and onboarding that you go through is really what gets you to that level and you prove yourself. And then strategically, as you go throughout your career, the biggest part, and I honestly can say I learned this a little bit later in my career, is networking. Networking. I don't care if you're in sales in another category of background. And I believe those two elements together makes a difference and can honestly, you know, help, you know, matriculate to that outcome and that career path. And then within that, I think in the sense of going from an account manager or sales manager or being responsible for sales for your immediate, you know, responsibility, if you want to get into a leadership role, even beyond the networking, is also understanding that someone's looking at you all the time. They're looking at you at whatever level. So realize that, recognize that, leverage your experience with those, as well as mentoring, and then also learn to mentor. So I think that combination sort of helps to give you to that next level to expand your experience.
And both of you can touch on this. So one of the things that we get a lot, especially like through I Choose the Ladder, is around mentorship, right? So how have you found mentors within your careers, and how do you nurture that mentor-mentee relationship? Because I think a lot of times the conversation is like, it's important to have a mentor, and then that's it, like ... And most people are like, listen, my family can't mentor me because they're not in this world. Like, I don't really know where to start. So for you all, how have you found mentors, and how do you use those mentorship relationships as you grow in yourselves and your careers?
Yeah, I can start. So a couple things. One, when I am looking for a mentor, I am not necessarily looking for one holistic person that can give me all of the things that I need. So I do look for multiple mentors for different skill sets or advice that I'm looking for in different spaces. Two things that I always try and make sure that I do when I am seeking mentorship and am in a mentorship relationship is, one, I'm very deliberate about the ask of, will you mentor me? Or, you know, just making sure that I'm very clear in what I am seeking from that person. And then two, being very deliberate about what exactly I am asking for them to help me with. So being super crystal clear, setting myself some type of like benchmark so that I can evaluate if they're helping me or if there's a different way that I can be responsible for the relationship in order to grow it. But being clear with them that I would like for them to be my mentor, and then being clear about the ask that I have of them, is where I found the most success in nurturing and growing my mentor relationships.
And, you know, I can honestly just say, I think Ashley, you know, really said it all. And I agree with that, especially with organizations that have mentorship programs. Sometimes that's easily cultivated. When you're not with an organization that has that set up, you know, I feel like also taking an organic approach, you may not know if that person is the right fit for a mentorship. So I even think a more casual coffee, you know, having something outside of the office environment, getting to know someone in their natural, authentic element lends to even their interest level in mentoring you, because you could reach out to someone that might not be in that mind frame. So I do say that in addition to networking for your intentions of what you want out of that person and vice versa, it's just really getting to know the person within their authentic self. So leverage some of that, whether it's in your organization, whether it's colleagues in a similar industry, doing those type of coffees and networking, the organization in itself, you know, NSN, that we're coming together. So I feel like there's also different ways that you can look and seek out mentorship within your industry and outside of your industry, just to kind of get a bigger scope in addition to what, Ashley was saying.
Yeah. One other thing watching that I think is important when you think about mentorship is the role that the mentee plays in the relationship. So the onus really is on them to drive the cadence in which you're communicating, be the leader in the outreach, set the tone for the conversation, make sure that the asks are manageable, follow up if your mentor is not necessarily being reciprocal in the communication with you. Obviously, you shouldn't be a nuisance, but it is your responsibility because you are seeking to gain something out of that relationship. You just mentioned that people have families and priorities, and especially in today's climate where we're all in the house and having to do every single role within our households, it's really hard to nurture relationships that aren't immediately there. And so I do want to make sure that I underscore the role that mentees play in really guiding and navigating and growing the relationship, and not necessarily just relying on the mentor to kind of lead in that space.
And then I guess the only thing that I would add is that every mentor that I have, I met them while I was doing work, right? And not necessarily like my core job, whether I was volunteering for an organization, I was on a committee with somebody and they saw something in me where they're like, yes, she's great at this. She's a little rough around the edges here. I have a skill set that can help her, right? And so if you are not comfortable just cold reaching out to somebody, because even for me, I feel like that's a little weird. Like if somebody I didn't know reached out, was like, hey girl, can you mentor me? I'd be like, wait, hold on, right? Because there are people that I know who need mentorship, but I think that if there are things that you're interested in that you can work with, you meet people who could potentially be mentors. If you don't know how to start in getting one, that's do work. Be somebody that someone wants to mentor, if that makes sense. So the next thing on networking, because I know in sales, right, everybody wants to network. Like everybody's at 10,000, which is why I'm so glad about COVID. Like sit down, go home, like just be at the house. You don't have to be at 900,000 events. You can rest, you can breathe. So how have you guys, how do you look at networking? And also how have you translated how you network during COVID, right? Like how you pivoted to still be able to network during this time?
Yeah. I'm still learning, but there are a couple. So one, I've been attending a lot of happy hours that are with friends that are consistent in my life, and then also newer friends that invite me to other things. Like we're all in the house and don't have anything to do. So like if I see a happy hour happening, sometimes I'll pop in and meet people that way. I also have like weirdly been liking the House Party app because it does kind of have this notion of like rooms and people are popping in randomly, it kind of feels like, but essentially I'm in rooms with my friends and other friends are joining and other industry people are joining, and so it's actually been a great way for me to meet people. It sounds really, really weird, and it's definitely a muscle that I'm practicing to build, but like getting myself out there virtually and joining like different virtual like living rooms essentially has been pretty beneficial for me to meet people right from my couch.
And Stacey, can you talk to the first part, like effective networking, like during non-COVID times? Like, how do you view sales, because you have to network? How do you do that effectively? And then also like to what Ashley said, how are you networking now?
So pre-non-COVID or pre-COVID times, as far as networking, at least within consumer products, there's industry meetings. So I think the industry meetings are very helpful as well, and it takes you out of that comfort zone of your organization. And oftentimes you're at those industry meetings and you're focused within, your segments of your customers and your categories, et cetera. But I really found it helpful to network more so socially there, especially as you get further along in your career. And also with the different companies that I've been with in the past, I've really honed in on networking with or keeping in touch with folks that I worked with other organizations. I mean, as far back as even being in college, internship. So I think keeping your network with companies that you even moved and grew out of. And that's an important aspect to keep in mind because folks are moving around. Many companies that I've gone to, there have been folks that came from other companies that I used to work at. So just really still keeping that connection from previous companies, I think, is another part of networking. And it's even just as simple as through LinkedIn, or your companies sometimes have groups, the ex company that you used to work with, and you're still part of that family. Because your company is just so much a part of your life. So I think that's another important aspect of networking. And really when I think about post-COVID, Ashley, I'm still figuring it out. At this point in time, it's more so driven by demand, as far as customer meetings that are now done virtually via, versus in person. Oftentimes, in the beginning, they started to be more of the conference calls without having them to be virtual. And as I got further along with the clientele that I picked up, and now I've ventured out on my own. So I've picked up clients that I handle independently, with consulting and, managing brands that want to be at retail. And now folks want to see you because I think COVID, we feel so claustrophobic. And having that personal interaction versus a conference call has made a difference, and having that transition, and even offers additional discussion and opportunity and getting to know them more authentically in their personal life in addition to the business aspect. So that's my post-COVID advice, as far as if you can avoid the conference call and do the face-to-face, that seems to be a bigger impact.
Yeah. And watching, can I give my pre-COVID answer? Is that okay?
Sure.
I'm sorry. So pre-COVID, I think that you just have to be really intentioned about what you're doing in networking. Like, it's really easy to just be out on the scene and like at these parties and social gatherings and meetings and industry events, and then not necessarily have tangible connections with people that are actually advancing the goals that you have. And so I do have a short list of people that I know will be in certain spaces that I will be at. I do look them up. I do make sure that I leave that room and like having at least an initial conversation with that person. And then I have a short memory. So I meet people and then I immediately like jot something down on the back of their business card. My notepad on my iPhone is like deep with just random notes of people that I met, with just like a couple like words or sentences or two of what we talked about, so that when I am able to follow up with them, I do have an inkling of what we talked about last time, because you do meet a lot of people, but being intentioned about it has been super helpful for me to be effective with my networking.
And I think, Ashley, you mentioned everybody's at home right now, so there's like a blurring of your world. So work and home, and if you don't have a dedicated workspace, you're eating where you're working and you're doing all that. So how are you all thinking about balancing your work life and your home life now that you're home, so that you can still crush the workplace with all of the other things that come with being at home?
Yeah. I'll let you go first, Stacey.
Yeah, I don't know if within the introduction, was mentioned, I have 3 girls. I have 3 kids who are doing e-learning. Working from home is actually pretty easy for me. I've done both in an office, shared office, and working from home. But working under COVID in the home environment is a challenge. It is a juggle, especially when you're managing work-family balance. And you have to be flexible and adaptable. And that's one of the aspects of sales. That being adaptable, I might have to have the early mornings before the kids get up. I have customers and clients that are on East Coast or West Coast, so you work within time zones. So that kind of variety I'm doing a little bit more of, as far as working out of the traditional hourly time frame that we're used to. So that's probably one of my biggest coping mechanisms, and doing the family balance with the COVID.
Yeah. So for me, I do not have kids. I have a husband though, so we do have to manage our schedule in the house. It's quiet time right now for him because I'm on here. But we do have, so we both have dedicated workspaces in the house. His is downstairs, mine is upstairs. We have switched since COVID to give ourselves a little bit of variety in our workspaces, but it does help to have the dedicated space so that you are kind of stepping into work and stepping out of work. One of the things that I have to protect myself from in this work from home environment, and not necessarily work from home in this like shelter in place environment, is burnout, because it's really easy to just sit at your computer and work all day because there isn't like an indicator of now it's time to go home, or like you have to hit the gym, and so like that's your like mechanism to move on to the next thing. So I do keep myself on a pretty strenuous schedule in terms of like, these are my workout hours, these are my work hours, this is my planned lunch time, this is a time in which I stop. I did also catch myself kind of like on autopilot once I was like in this step-by-step process. And so since COVID started, I did take 6 days off of just like, no like computers down, just like, minding my own business within the house still, but minding my own business. And that did help to reset my brain a little bit, because I was literally like on a hamster wheel, just doing the same thing over and over and over. And I found that I wasn't being strategic in what I was thinking about. I was just kind of like doing. So that was super helpful in the midst of like the structure that I built to kind of like break it and re-enter.
That's good. So for me, mine is like, my workout is what, and I have like, I'm working out at home, but to me, that's the thing that breaks up my day. So like I'm working, and then once I work out, it's like, I live life now or whatever that may look like at this point. And so for me, having something very tangible, that's like, okay, brain, switch off. Like when I wake up in the morning and make my bed, my brain's like, okay, it's time to work. And then when I put on my workout clothes, it's like, all right, it's time to like shut it down for the day. So I think having specific things that maybe help you, like your mind switch, is also been good for balance. And I don't have a husband or kids. It's just me and myself in this house, and my thoughts, which could be just as crazy. And so figuring out how to balance all of that stuff during this season has also been, it's been a learning experience. So one of the things about now, it's like the catchy thing is like having a seat at the table, right? You both are in leadership positions at your respective companies or at your company. Can you think about a time during create for yourself, right? To bring yourself into the table. And if so, like, how did you do that effectively? Because I think some people who are listening are trying to get to that next level where they are included in the higher level conversations and strategic planning and thought leadership within their company. So how do you do that if there's not necessarily like a, hey, please come join us?
Yeah. I've had to be super bullish on just not even asking, just like saying like, okay, like I'll attend that meeting. Can you forward it to me? Or, like just making the assumption that I am a part of that conversation. This is the business group that I'm running. And so like, of course, like I would be there. That takes a little bit of confidence and skills to kind of just like roll up to a person and say, don't forget to forward me that meeting. It also takes a lot of networking and talking within your organization so that you do know the meetings and conversations that are happening beyond the floor, especially now, because you don't know what's happening in your organization from the person that is supposed to be sitting right next to you. But I've just kind of had to be bullish about like me being at the table. And of course, when I get there, I do provide value. I do provide a meaning and a role for myself in the meeting. But I used to be a little bit more timid and afraid about it, but I am not afraid now to just be like, hey, can you make sure I'm on that meeting or whatever, so that I can make sure that I'm in the rooms that I need to be in.
Yeah, and to expand a little bit more on what Ashley was saying, let's say you don't even know the table exists. Let's say you're rising and trying to get invitations to the table. And as I mentioned, people are watching you through your career. They're watching you as you're doing your jobs. And what you can do to set yourself apart, let's just say you're in a sales management team, is if there are special projects, so even if there's not a quote unquote table, how do I get this special project? Or how do I, stand out a little bit more than my counterparts so that I can start getting invitations to the tables, or so that I can start being the person that they point out that, hey, I've seen, Stacy here doing this and this. We've got this special project coming up in the next 2-3 months. Let's kind of pull her in. And how do you set yourself apart to do that is by, stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something that's in addition to your role, or having a 3-month project, doing something outside of your traditional role so that you can add additional element above what you're already doing within your current realm. And it can be from any function. So, and there's other parts of your organization, whether it's diversity and inclusion, and you want to be on this women's committee for this, or you want to, do work something within the non-for-profit, and, just look at different elements that may not even be specific to your role, that just gives you more visibility, more visibility, and the diversity of the people that are seeing you. Because a lot of times the table is made up of such a diverse group of folks. And as I mentioned, people are watching you that you don't even know. People are speaking about you, about your behalf, and you don't even realize it. You're not even intentionally connected with them. And just keep that in the back of your mind. And I wasn't even aware of that as much until later in my career. So also knowing the intentional part, as Ashley's describing, also understand the proactive part that's happening with others around you, and just putting yourself in more places to be more visible.
Yeah, I think what Stacey is saying is also important in terms of getting asked to join these tables because of essentially your brand. So I talked a little bit at the beginning about the strengths that I have like learned and brought to the role that I have today. As I'm managing a brand every single day. And so I'm vocal about what those strengths are. If you catch me in an elevator, like I definitely have like a 1 to 2 sentence, like this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm doing type situation. And so people do know the things that I'm famous for essentially at the organization. And when they need those things, that's one of the biggest things that I learned from my time in sales, of how to put the value proposition around the things that I'm doing, how to name the impact of the strengths that I have, so that I'm doing the work for them in helping them to understand the strengths that I have, how to apply them, and the results that they can expect if they do bring me to the table.
And then I'll say just like one word of caution about that. Like, as you are joining these things in your companies, like, make sure it's things that you actually care about and you want to work on, right? Like, don't join it because it looks good, because you will burn out. Because you'll be on 12 different committees doing 17 different things. Your job will start to suffer, and people will be like, oh, she does too much, or he does too much, or he's all over the place. And I think that a lot of times, if the motivation behind why you're doing the things is not solid, and there isn't a solid strategy as to why you're doing stuff, you may end up causing yourself more harm than good. So I do agree, like, find 2 or 3 things where you know, like, you have a skill set where you can get in and kill it, and people will say really great about you and your contributions, but don't spread yourself so thin that you are ineffective everywhere. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the second part of that, though, is, now that you're at the table, do you feel a responsibility to make room for other women of color, Black women, to also have a seat at that table? And if you do, how are you being intentional about making that stuff happen?
So I guess I'll talk about this pre-COVID and post-COVID. So I'll talk about post-COVID first, because that's the most relevant for me right now. Our organization obviously is going through lots of changes. There's a ton of deprioritizations and reprioritizations of projects. A lot of people are shifting within the organization to kind of figure out, like, how are we covering new work streams and how are we deprioritizing. All that to say, we created a program that is based in career agility. And essentially, where there are people who are under allocated right now, we're able to transition those people over to projects that are, or people that are over allocated right now. And so I've been very intentional about making sure that the career agility opportunities are known within the communities that I know may not have as strong of a network, especially in this work from home space. So when there are projects that come up on my team or on our social good team, which I work with quite frequently, I definitely have a short list of people that I'm reaching out to and saying, like, hey, I know you're like operating at 50% right now. Like, can you allocate 50% of your time to this project? This is, you know, what is expected of you. I think you would be good at it because of X, Y, and Z, but definitely making sure that they're not just sitting at home on their couch and not knowing the opportunities that are available, but are definitely aware of what's happening. Pre-COVID, I think it was the same thing. It just wasn't as tangible, I guess, in terms of like it being a program or there being so much flexibility to jump on an entire project in a whole different business group. So I definitely had that same practice, but it was more so in smaller bite-sized opportunities of like, can you work on this small initiative? I also am really keen about bringing people to events. We sponsor a ton of things across Chicago, across the United States, and we always have extra tickets to events. So I'm very keen about making sure that there are people who may not have the opportunities to attend those types of events, meet those types of people, have access to those types of learnings. I make sure that when we do have tickets, they do not go to waste, and we are bringing people to events that maybe normally would not have gotten an invite extended. And Stacey?
And I think in the corporate environment, just to add another aspect, I think for your question, when you're already at the table, how do you bring others to the table? And once you have that connection with the organization or the group that you're within, how do you have that connection with them and let them know, you know, let's think outside of the box, and maybe let's look at someone within marketing, look at someone within finance, look at someone who we've just brought in through an internship. How do we leverage growing that table, you know, bringing some dynamic to the table, insight, even if it's within a special project, just to get more visibility for, let's say, that person that you feel could be, you know, an additional benefit and grow and develop. And I feel that once you have established your connection with your group at that table, they have that trust and that authenticity that this is an enhancement that'll help the team. And, you know, you always have someone in the back of your mind that you're connected with. And with that person, you know, networking with them and letting them know this is an opportunity to expand your experience, to network within the leadership group, and what recommendations and advice you can get to be more comfortable, because some people aren't ready for that. I mean, like I said, some people are looking at you, doesn't mean that you want to do it. It wasn't your original intent. And so there's folks that sometimes you may have your eye on and they don't realize or recognize the skill sets that they have and what they could bring to that table. So really merging those two together is another aspect, I think, in the traditional corporate American environment.
And then for me, I report into the CEO, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I make sure that when there are people in the company who are doing amazing things that he may not know of, that he knows that they were the ones who did it, right? Because who are more junior may not feel as confident advocating for themselves. And I think a lot of the times, if you're at the table, you get the glory and you get like the downfall of when things go bad and you have to deal with it and figure it out. But I think it's important, at least for me, to be like, hey, that idea was great, right? Alex was the one, he killed it, right? Like he did X, Y, and Z, just because I know that because he knows me, there's already a level of like affinity and trust and all of that. So the way that I'm trying to go on is making sure that the spotlight gets equally shared when it's deserved. So we have a question I like this question. In the chat box, it says, this goes back to having work-life balance at home. What are you reading, watching, and listening to? Can be something career or non-career related.
I was actually just talking about this with my husband because The Last Dance is over. And so we're actually trying to figure out what are we going to do with our Sundays. We had big social events planned throughout it, in the house, of course, like cooking dinner and like, having like a whole evening with that. So we're actually on the prowl right now trying to figure out what we are going to watch next. I listen to Audible a ton. I am not the best at just sitting down and reading a book. My mind starts to wander elsewhere. So I leverage Audible. I have a lot of autobiographies that I've been listening to that I've been trying to do, not necessarily workbooks, but listen to more social type engagements. I listened to Angie Martinez's book from Hot 97. Yeah, Hot 97. A couple weeks ago, and then Dapper Dan also had an autobiography on there that I guess it kind of is a business book, but I listened to that one, which helped me to just think about things that were not necessarily work related, because again, like I don't want to sit here all day and just work. I want to like decompress and remove myself from the situation. Stacey.
And I am bad with names, so I have to come back to say the two resources, but I was getting tired of the TV and the, binge watching, et cetera, and the Zoom calls socially. So, I was listening to podcasts, and I cannot think of the station, but basically it's all of these emerging companies and brands that all of us have heard of, but just how they became where they were.
How I built this?
How I built this. I love it. Oh my God, I'm so addicted. And, when I was with Cortu Sunberg, I'm working with various companies, smaller companies, bigger companies, and the stories behind the companies are so amazing. And it's why I'm so, excited about working with different brands and companies that are growing and developing, but knowing their story, how they started, just the funnest thing. So if you haven't done it, do that. And then Valerie Jarrett, I picked up her book a while ago that I never finished because I'm bad with that too sometimes, starting one, but her story is so inspirational, and I was more so used to her political, positioning and what she, did, what was visible to me, but her story. And I think one of the themes that goes throughout it is get out of your comfort zone. If you're not scared, you're not growing. And there's different folks that speak about it, but it was a surprise to me, some of the verbiage and articulations that she made throughout the book. And that's another recommendation. So I have to finish that one as well. That one's on my list.
Yeah, I also listened to Valerie Jarrett's book. It was very good. One other podcast that I just would be remiss if I didn't mention is there are two of them. It's now I'm forgetting the name. Bill, it's like something about Making Oprah and then Making Obama. And there's also a Making Beyonce. It's not as good. But Making Oprah and Making, it's just like the story is a little but the other two are very, very good in terms of getting a little bit more context around how they built the brands that they built to become the people that they are.
Yeah.
Mine is a little less. So there is a novela on Netflix called El Dragón, right? It's real silly. 2 seasons. Each season has 40 episodes. But I'm telling you, if you just need, and if you can speak Spanish, even better, but there's captions if you need it. Amazing. I finished all 2 seasons. Don't judge me. That's just where I was.
El Dragón.
El Dragón. And it's listen, it'll take you it'll take you a lot of different places at once. In terms of podcasts, like, so we have an I Choose a Lot of podcasts where we interview Black women specifically in business. So check that out. Also the Tim Ferriss show. So he interviews world-class like performers in all different industries and walks of life. Super interesting, but the episodes are really long. So they're like 2 hours plus each, but totally worth it. And then I actually started a book club because I miss spaces and like drinking with my girls on Sundays, like my boozy brunches. So this month, surprisingly, we're reading the Little Red Book of Sales because it's a career-based book club. So the books that we read are things that can help accelerate our careers. And so this month we're reading the Little Red Book of Sales, which is awesome. It's a great read. And he gets to the point. He's not very fluffy. He's a sales, like he's not fluffy at all. He gets to the point it's really easy to get through. Oh, this is a good one. So, and this question is always very tricky because people think that in order to be selling, you have to be in sales, but everybody's selling all the time. But the question is, how can someone with a medical background break into the sales industry without sales experience?
That's a tough question. That's come across because I've worked with companies like a Johnson & Johnson that has a pharmaceutical side versus a consumer side. And I'm gonna tell you, it's a totally different level of sales. And oftentimes when it is something that, consumer, you kind of grow up in consumer, it's very small. You literally could have 50 people in the country. In pharmaceuticals, you could have 50 people in a city. I mean, that's how different it is. And that's the networking part about it, because everything's transferable. If you can sell, you can sell. You're basically selling one item or one concept or one process. And if you have that sales ability, you have that skill set. So you might just have to network a little stronger when it's outside of your industry. And even I had to learn that, and I'm getting more comfortable. That's why I said, the Valerie Jarrett book, or some of the folks that I'm talking about, they've made career switches that are completely different. And you can do that. You're basically upselling your skill set versus your transferable skills versus your actual experience within that industry, if that makes sense. But definitely the networking and having someone who sees that within you helps a lot more than, competing with someone that already has the background. I mean, if you've got 5 people that are coming in, I've got to hire one account manager who's managed Walgreens. I'm looking for someone who's already had that experience and has been in consumer sales. But I have hired folks who have been outside of the traditional consumer sales because of that element of pushing their transferable skills and really pulling that out that I might not see because I don't know your industry that well. You have to sell your skill set, if that makes sense, when you're really switching industries.
Yeah. I can speak to this intimately, except like very differently, where I came from a creative industry, not medical, like the total opposite of medical. And so I had to like figure out, how do I transition my creative life over to, at the time I was joining Microsoft. And 2 things that have been consistent throughout my entire career. I feel like I talk about strengths a lot, but being able to identify the strengths that I had learned in the creative space and how those could be applicable on the tech advertising sales side at Microsoft was like defining and I actually interviewed there twice. The first time I didn't get it. The second time, once I figured out how to talk about my strengths, that was transformative for me. I also rewrote my resume to lead with my strengths and not my experience, because it wasn't applicable. So being able to, talk about like, I learned X, Y, and Z attribute. Here are a couple examples of like how I developed that, but the leader and like thing that I want you to take away from this is that I had this attribute. The last thing is, like Stacey mentioned, like there's sales in literally everything. Working in creative is actually the hardest sales job that I ever had, because you are responsible for selling ideas. And that is not something that's tangible. It's hard to create a picture in someone's head. There's no value immediately connected to it. It's like the most abstract thing in the world. And so being able to talk about that in meetings and just understand the steps that I took in order to create these ideas, put value around them, and then like sell them to some of the top brands around the world, helped people to understand the strengths that I was talking about on my resume and how to transfer those easily in their mind from like a creative idea over to, at the time, display advertising at Microsoft.
And then just
Love
like
it.
one layer, what Ashley just said. So LinkedIn, right? When you're looking for a job, people are going to go to your LinkedIn, and your LinkedIn should be designed for the job you want, not the job you have. You already have that job, right? And so these skills that she's talking about, like, are they reflected in the way that your LinkedIn information is laid out? Because like, that's where people are going to go. And as you think through these skills and how you talk about them, right, it's all about framing and the story that you know how to tell and choose to tell to sell yourselves. Make sure that the places people are going to check, like your resume and your LinkedIn, are reflected in showing the skills for the jobs that you want, not the job that you currently have.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing that sometimes I see that's not helpful is just an overwhelming amount of skills that people just throw at you of like, I can do all of these things. That is not helpful. And I will say that when you are interviewing candidates, you are interviewing a ton of candidates for a role. And so it's really easy to get things confused and misattribute certain skill sets and stories to different candidates, which just like, it's not fair, but it happens. And so what I've found the most effective in people that I'm interviewing, as well as my interviewing techniques, is to really just nail down 3 things that I want people to walk away from, and use that as the thread of all of the examples that I'm sharing with them, the questions that I'm asking, the consistency across my resume, my LinkedIn, my portfolio, my website, like all of those things are really laddering up to the 3 things that I want the person to walk away from the conversation with, which hopefully will just get reiterated so that they remember it and attach it to me. It's also really easy when I'm interviewing candidates for me to then go sell them to the other people that have to make the decisions, when I have like a very focused story that I am trying to tell about the person.
And depending on, I think, how much time or free time you have, right, there are ways in this current technology world, right, you could write stuff about how to sell as a non-salesperson, right, to show that you have the ability to think like a salesperson.
Yeah.
You have to show your core job. Like, there are ways to get creative. I think Stacey talked about being outside of the box, right? There are out of the box ways to show that you have the skill set, even if it's not your day-to-day core responsibility.
Yeah, I think
hold on, let me check to see. Oh, someone says that they love Audible. Yes, Audible is amazing. Go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in past life, it was like hard to get an op-ed in the New York Times to be able to share your thoughts on things and get more of a platform for people to hear your thinking. Whereas today we have things like Medium or the notes on LinkedIn that really, like, you can throw together very quickly and they spread so fast, like actually faster than op-eds at this time. So I definitely want to underscore that, what you just talked about, watching, as something you can do when you are looking to be a little bit more transferable, utilizing those resources to really expand the stage that you're standing on and really highlight the thoughts and thought leadership that you have.
Someone said about Audible. So I just remember the free resource. If you have, at least in Chicago, or in, like, I have a library card in the suburbs because their libraries are better. That's where my mom lives. But there's a free service called Hoopla, and it's just like Audible, and it's free through the library. So if you have a library card, go on to Hoopla, put in the information, and you can rent 10 books for free every single month. They have audiobooks, they have ebooks, they have tons of resources. And so right now, budgets and, discretionary income may be, something that is tight for certain people. So Hoopla, and they also have Flipster, which is like magazines that are free. So check that out. If you have a library card, you should have a library card, but it's HOOPLA digital. Yeah, okay. So check that out. It's totally free. I take advantage all the time and get my 10 free books every month. So check that out as well. Ashley, you talked about The Last Dance, right? We're in Chicago. Let's talk about it. Any leadership moments or career moments that you got from that have you thinking about your own career? And if so, pick the top one. I'm recording the podcast episode this week is about, career lessons from MJ. So I would be super excited to see, like, if you have one thing that you took away that's like a career gem.
Actually, my career gem came from Phil Jackson. Because, if I gotta pick one, I'm gonna pick Dennis Rodman. sorry, Phil Jackson. I'm gonna pick Dennis Rodman because he kind of just did what he wanted to do. He clearly went on his PTOs and did whatever it is that he was doing on his PTOs. But like they tolerated that behavior from him because he was really good at his job. Like when he needed to perform, he got on the basketball court. He did what he needed to do. He provided all the assists, did all of the rebounds, did all of the things that he was supposed to do. And so like when he was off in Vegas or doing his WWE thing, it was irritating, but they dealt with it because he was really, really good at his job. And I think that should have been a reminder for everybody of like, you have got to be good at your job. You have got to be good at your trade before you start asking for things or pushing the envelope on things, because it all falls apart if you are not good at what you are being paid to be there to do.
Stacey, did you watch?
I haven't watched it all, and we're trying to watch it together, so trying to get our schedules. But, you know, when I think of MJ, and I moved from Florida to Chicago, so during the early 90s, and really it's back to the out of your comfort zone and out of your box and owning your own narrative. I think that's something that, you know, also is very important in corporate America is, you know, others can tell your story, but you got to be able to tell your own story. And for MJ to go from basketball and actually try baseball, just to have the nerve, the guts to try baseball, to me was just like an aha moment that when I took a similar opportunity to do something so drastically different than what others thought you should or could do or had the ability to do, to whether you learn or grow from it, it doesn't mean that was going to be your next big thing, but just to have the guts and the risk taking. And I think for, you know, women, sometimes we are a little slower, a little more timid, and we feel like we have to check all these boxes before we can do X, Y, or Z, but just having the audacity to just say I can, or at least try, I think that stood out to me. Yeah.
And for me, my question is, does how you get to be great matter, right? So everybody, I think after the one episode, he was like, yeah, when people see me, they may think I'm a tyrant, but that's because you never won anything. And everybody on social media was like, yes, I feel that in my spirit, like all of that stuff. But then if you notice, like in the next shot, he's still talking about it and he looks like he's about to start crying and he leaves and they cut to something else, right? And I think it must be hurtful, or he feels a way by the way that the people that he's worked with all this time describe him, right? Like they'll say he was, and like the end result was great, but the process in working with him, like was miserable for people, completely miserable. And so for me, the one thing is like, is that the type of leader that I want to be, where the end justifies the means, where everybody hates me, but I make it to CEO? Or is it, you know, is there a balanced route to it? And like, it is the cost of greatness acting and behaving in that way. And I just don't know that I think that it's worth it to be like get to a great place, but not necessarily be considered like a great leader. But it troubled me, especially like if people who were saying yes had a boss who talked to them the way Michael talked to people, they would quit, right? Like I wouldn't want to work for somebody like that. And so thinking about how, you know, mental health and all the things that we talk about with career, whereas we can acknowledge that he's great, but like his methods may, you know, be a little bit questionable. So that was like my one thing. I was like, what you mean they never won anything? Beyonce wins all the time and nobody says that she's a tyrant, or maybe she has people do her dirty work, but what we're not gonna do is be shady to people, MJ. But yeah, that was my one thing. Let's see. Yeah, there were so many good things though. Like Phil Jackson and like the centering of yourself, amazing. So many good career lessons. Let's see. What action steps can men take to be an ally for women in the workplace? This is such a good question.
Oh, there's so many. I think, so number one, acknowledging when there is an issue in the room. So a lot of times men are oblivious. So just like taking the extra moment to like take the thought process and just like view what's going on around you, so that if you do need to raise awareness for something, you're able to do that. And then two, like if you're occupying a space where you recognize that there is a problem, give up your space. We have that happen a lot where I'm like, sorry, or people volunteer, I'm stepping off of this panel, or I'm not attending this meeting, or I'm, going to step back in this presentation and allow this person to present these slides, so that there is the opportunity. I think that's probably the most powerful thing that you can do is utilize the position and the power that you have to grant it and give it to somebody else.
Yeah, no, I agree, Ashley. And I can say earlier in my career, my industry was male dominated. I mean, literally male dominated. And especially when you're younger in your 20s, and most of my matriculation honestly happened from male bosses, but when they would probably sense the timidness or maybe to give me extra confidence to speak up or to kind of validate, that helped me, you know, as far as getting stronger and being able to voice more. But then also, you know, as I got further along in the career and I have colleagues and, you know, still a little bit more male driven, and there's that social aspect, the social aspect where men just feel more comfortable with men. So they're going to go play golf. They're going to do, you know, whatever extracurricular that still encompasses networking and still helps your career. And I remember I had a manager, there's 4 of us on a team, pretty much had, you know, similar background. And he's like, yo, Stacey, you know, why don't you come out with us to do such and such? You're never hanging out with us. And I had to push back. I said, well, I've never been invited. And so when I think of men that might, like you said, you may not think to say, hey, you probably don't even assume a girl can ball, you know, golf. So you're thinking, you know, we're not going to play basketball with Stacey. She doesn't play b-ball. But when they actually get to know you and talk to you in that, you know, comfort zone, then I think that aspect for men is helpful in itself, even if it's not specific to a career-based, you know, responsibility or actual tactful job, but actually just feeling more comfortable to socialize with women in a similar way that you're comfortable socializing with men. I think that helps in a, you know, in that aspect.
And this is not a best practice, so don't do what I'm about to say. Well, find your way of doing this. So I have a really good relationship with my CEO, and we were on a call with like our executive team, and I made a suggestion, and then he waited, and then he made the same suggestion. I was like, did you just suggest what I already suggested? Like, that part don't say, like, that's not, you don't do that. But he was like, yeah, I was just reiterating what you said, right? Like, don't mansplain stuff. Like, it's totally fine to like, yes and someone, but to verbatim say what a woman has already said, like that is the most annoying, like, and it happens all the time. And I don't know if it's because we don't, not men, but like we just don't listen, or we're not in the moment in like when we're in conversations, but it happens all the time. And I think it's unconscious. So finding ways to, one, not take someone's thunder, just because you don't know how long it takes somebody to hype themselves up to even make a suggestion in spaces. And so if there are ways that you can support what they say without re-explaining it, I think like that goes a really, really long way, because, you know, imposter syndrome is something that women struggle with more than men. And so the mental gymnastics that we do to even come to the table to especially early in our careers, like find a way to yes and as opposed to just reiterating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because ain't no got time to be checking y'all all the time. Like it's exhausting to be like, hey, can we talk on the side? Can we talk on the side? It's a lot. Hold on, I think we have one. I think we end at 1, so we have time for a couple more questions. Let me go back to the list really quickly. So one of the things in sales, right, we just talked about golf and we talked about the social elements. Do you have guidelines around how you separate your work social life and your real social life, and how do you manage that, like friends as coworkers and coworkers as friends, and social media and engaging, and how you share when we work in a lot of professions that are social, but they might not be your friends in real life?
Yeah, I have a problem with that. Because a lot of my friends are people that I met in the workspace, and then I also work in social media. So my social media starts blurring into like my workspace, and like it's all one big melting pot. I will say though that I do exercise close friends on Instagram stories to really make sure that I'm gating the things that I want to be gated, and then Facebook groups is actually like where I spend a lot of my time. I have one for my family, so like there's certain things that get posted there. I have one for like, you know, different topics that I'm engaged with from a friend perspective. So the things that go on like my like true feed are just like things that I'm comfortable with both work people and personal friends seeing, and then I do have like the like more pocket type spaces that I utilize in order to gate what I don't want people to see.
I'm a little more on the seasoned side, so you have to realize I've been around since the early 90s, so things were done differently then. So just because of that habit, my social circle is quite different than my professional circle. So I don't have a lot of interaction with it. Even if I do like skiing or golfing, etc., I really don't intertwine that, but it helps to be able to talk about it, when I'm in my corporate environment, that they know what my social life is outside of work, because then it sometimes is aha. It's not just the kids, it's not just work, it's not just the organizations that you're involved in, but what's your extracurricular. And, it helps to define who you are. But I do like keeping it separate because, especially as you get further along, there's aspects that I like to be more comfortable with, in my social environment that I can't and probably wouldn't do in the professional aspect. So
Yeah.
I don't intertwine too much.
The one thing I will say though is like, I don't know if this is even like appropriate, but thank God for COVID, because I was on the road like way too much. And so that kind of created a space where my coworkers kind of had to become my friends, because we were doing things in I was going to like international destinations that I had never even been to with my husband. And like, I have to be friends with these people to enjoy these experiences that I'm having. And so it kind of just like created itself out of necessity, because like you're especially in sales on the road so much.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm super happy to connect with all of my coworkers on LinkedIn. Like, let's keep it on the platform. We can talk about anything you want to on LinkedIn. On Instagram, if we work together, not happening. And Facebook, it's the same, right? Because I made the error early on in my career to let, I worked at Comedy Central and I became friends with the president of the network on Facebook. And there was a period where I was not, like, it just didn't register. So I'm in my 20s, we're posting all types of things on, and then it was like, oh, wait, like So like after that, I put her on limited profile so she could only see limited things. And then just for me in general, if we work together, the chances that we're going to be Facebook friends and or Instagram friends while we work together is really, really slim. Because I just want to have a space that's mine to be like whatever I want to be. Not that I'm anything ratchet, but even if I want it to be, like, that's my decision.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn, I will connect with all of my coworkers and like anybody professional, because I feel like that's what that social media platform is for. And then we have, I'm going to ask one question, then we'll have the last question. So this question is, how do you respond when recruiters or we said that. So if they add you, what do you do? Do you like decline, or do you just?
I mean, if it's a recruiter, and I like don't have an established relationship with them, I just leave them on the wait list. But I don't like decline. I just like don't do anything.
They can recruit you again. Don't decline them, because then they can just keep.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, like my friends. But I also am a unicorn here because I work in social media, so it's kind of a necessity.
Yeah, Stacey already answered. Okay, so the last question before I turn it back over to Taylor. So we all know that decisions about our careers are going to be made when we're not in the room. So what do you hope people are saying about you when you're not in the room?
I'm very deliberate about giving people the script. So like my managers, the people around me, my advocates, the mentors that I have, they all know the story. They know the 3 strengths that I want people to know me for. They know the career aspirations that I have. I learned that like midway through my career, that like if I can manage my own narrative, then I have more control over the narrative. And so it's definitely something that like I'm talking about on a very regular basis with the people that I know will be in the room when the decisions are being made.
Yeah. Really listening both to you, Watson, and Ashley, a younger generation, I wish I had that and had that knowledge and that skill set, in my 20s and my 30s. I mean, honestly, even in my early 40s. So I really applaud you all for that. And I can say I was a late bloomer with that. So my narrative oftentimes did get indicated by others. But when you ask the question, what is that message that came across, the reflection that I received, at least from folks that came back to tell me, how did you get here? It was really connecting. I think that was the overarching theme that came back to me. Like, Stacey connects. She connects with her customers. She connects with her colleagues. She connects with, the team. So that connection, that authenticity evidently, reflects within what I do. And so that narrative, in whichever way they articulate it, is really what's been talked about in that room when I'm not there. And that connection leads to the ability to collaborate and be that thought partner and to meet that end goal. And I feel that piece and that element is what resonates for my theme or my story or my narrative.
Mm. And for mine, it's just that they have no concerns about tying their reputation with mine. right? Like they know that the brand that they've worked so hard to build is safe when they like tie my brand to it, which to me means, I'm not going to embarrass them. I'm not going to do anything to hurt their relationships. I'm going to deliver what I say, that the quality of the work that I put out is excellent. So if you say that like, I've been working for 20 years, I have this brand reputation, and I have no qualms about tying it to Watson's reputation, I think that that's the highest compliment that you could ever pay me.
The trust. Yeah.
The trust. Yeah. Like at any level, like there's no, like, I have no concerns about tying my reputation with hers. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor. Thank you all so much for joining our conversation. We hope that it was helpful and that we shared some stuff that you can use.
Yes, that was awesome. Thank you, Watson. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Stacey. Again, more jewels and gems being dropped. I was over here snapping, just like last week. I think for me, what made this conversation a little bit different compared to last week was that we talked a lot about, specifically about sales, which is perfect because we are a national sales network and that's who we're primarily made up of, but just how important and how much you all are adjusting to what has happened now that we're all working from home. I think that's super important, how your selling styles may probably have changed during this time, how your networking is changing, how even your leadership is changing, but how the change is positive. Like no one was sharing anything negative, everything was positive. You're getting to know the people in your household more, you're getting to know yourself more. I can feel you watching, I'm by myself out here too. So you're getting to know yourself more, you're getting to know your loved ones more, you're getting to know your coworkers more on different facets through social media, through having more personal conversations. I think all those things are really important, and especially as we consider how the world is going to change drastically once we do get to have more face-to-face interactions, and how all these things that we've learned while being at home are innovative, and how we can take these into the next roles and whatever we're doing, whatever our future brands are, however we're networking, it's all going to be good stuff. So thank you again for sharing. I also want to take the time to thank our guests, of course. Thank you to our members and our friends of National Sales Network. We had the New York, New Jersey chapter hop on. We had our friends at National Black MBA hop on. So I want to say thank you to them and thank you for your continued support of our mission and vision. I also want to thank our sponsors, Allstate, Pfizer, Grainger, Johnson & Johnson, and ADP, who also share and support the diversity and inclusion mission of National Sales Network Chicago chapter. If you are interested in learning more about NS in Chicago and how you become a member, or would like to consider a partnership with us, please email us at hello@nsinchicago.org. Be sure to visit our website at www.nsinchicago.org and follow us on all social media. And definitely be sure to connect with our WCWs from this week and last week. They would love to connect with you and continue to share their jewels and gems. And we want to thank you again. Also, my events coordinator, she said that she wants us all to smile for a photo op. So can we all just smile really quickly? Okay, I'm sure she got it. So thank you all again for joining us. This live stream will be available via email. So for all of our guests who attended, we will send this out towards the end of the week. Thank you again, and we will see you online at our next event. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.